Hey guys, Brian here from Better Chess Training. And in today's video, I'm going to be continuing our discussion of this calculation skill of choosing between two very similar options when it comes to calculating. So check this position out, black to play, and see what you would pick. And if you want to go a step further, see what that other option is and try to figure out why it's not as good. Okay, if we take a look at this position, we see a couple things. That White's king has a lot of is a little airy. It has a lot of weaknesses around him. He has a lot of light square weakness here along this diagonal, along the fourth rank, as well as the back rank. So the two main candidates, which look like they will pretty much lead to the same position, are rook to d1 and queen to h5 check, with that idea of eventually queen to h1 mate. But we need to, when we see these two options, we need to determine if one is actually better than the other. And so this means looking and calculating the line out, and especially trying to find your opponent's most powerful resistance. Okay, so what I would typically do is I would look at the most forcing move first, which is queen to h5 check. Okay, queen to h5 check, and there's two options, king to g1 and king to g2. If we go king to g2, which doesn't lead to an immediate follow-up check, we have rook to d1 with this threat of queen to h1 mate. Now, if white tries to do something like f3, then we have queen to h1 check, king to f2, and then queen to f1 is checkmate. And there is a line where he actually avoids mate, but basically is an impossible position, and that would be a line like g4. And then we have queen to h1 check. The king goes here. And if we just play rook to g1 check, the king might get a little more freedom here with king to f4. So we could play a move like e5 first, cutting off this, and now threatening this checkmate. And of course, the queen can give up the queen. White can sacrifice his queen for the rook. But let's say he plays something like rook to e4, and here the checkmate is not immediate. Rook to g1 check, king to f4 is forced, queen to h2 check, say king to e4, and then after rook to e1, we're going to win this rook. So even though it's not a forced checkmate right away, we're going to win. So basically, we see that queen to h5 check is leads to a winning line. Now, the question is, does rook to d1 also win? And so let's take a look. We have rook to d1, and here, if of course, if white tries to do something like block this check, and then we have queen to h1 check, and then we have a very similar line to what we talked about, which actually transposes, I believe, with e5, and we saw what happens there. So that looks good. Of course, here we have to see what the actual threats are. So now the threats are queen to h1 is mate, and queen to h5. So of course, if we just stop one without considering the other, for example, something like this, then we see what happens, which transposes queen to h5 check, queen to g2, queen to h1 check, and then checkmate with queen to f1. And we already went over that. So if we don't look hard enough, we might conclude that rook to d1 is equivalent to queen to h5 check. But there is a move that white can play that stops both the queen to h5 check threat as well as queen to h1. And if you want, pause the video and see if you can find it. But if you've already found it or just want to keep going, the move is queen to e4. And so here we're defending this threat directly. And if we have queen to h5 check, we have queen to h4 blocking the threat. And of course, the rook is defending the f3 square, so we can't enter there. And if we try to go back, well, we can just go back as well. So I just wanted to show you this position. I actually put this up on Twitter a couple of days ago, but it's an important little, like I said, micro skill in our calculation is when we see two options that seem equal. We should take a little time, if we have time in our game, to try to determine whether one is actually better than the other. So I hope you guys enjoyed that, and I'll talk to you soon.